The photograph slipped from the leather wallet and landed face up on the cold tile floor. Chloe picked it up before anyone could stop her. Her small fingers traced the faded image, a young woman with honey blonde hair and a familiar smile. "This is my mommy," the 6-year-old announced. A serving tray crashed behind the counter. Amy stood frozen, face drained of color. Coffee pooled at her feet, steam rising like ghosts in the frigid air. The stranger in the rumpled suit, the man who had stumbled in from the blizzard, turned slowly toward the child. 3 pairs of eyes met. His, the girl's, then Amy's. The same shade of blue. Amy gripped the counter until her knuckles whitened. She knew this man. 7 years she had spent trying to forget his face. And the child holding that photograph was the secret she had buried deepest of all. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Let's continue with the story. Amy lunged forward and snatched the photograph from Chloe's hands. "Don't touch that," she snapped. Chloe's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. In 6 years, Amy had never raised her voice at her daughter, not once. "Mommy, go to the kitchen, now." The diner fell silent. Forks stopped mid-air. Conversations died. Every eye turned toward the scene unfolding by the window booth. Andrew rose from his seat, legs unsteady. He stared at the crying child, at the curve of her chin, the shape of her nose, the unmistakable blue of her eyes. His eyes. Amy. His voice cracked on her name. She grabbed Chloe's wrist and pulled her toward the kitchen door. The child stumbled, sobbing, confused. "Amy, wait." The kitchen door slammed shut. Andrew started after them, but a firm hand caught his arm. Mrs. Rosie, the 68-year-old owner, stepped into his path. Her expression carried no warmth. "I don't know what's happening here," she said quietly. "But you need to sit down." That child. Sit down. Andrew's legs gave out. He collapsed back into the booth, hands trembling. The photograph lay on the floor where Amy had dropped it. He reached down and picked it up, turned it over. His own handwriting stared back at him. Faded ink, 7 years old. The one I let go. His phone buzzed. A notification from the bank account balance, $87.43. Payment overdue. He silenced it without looking. None of that mattered anymore. Outside. The blizzard howled. Wind rattled the windows. Snow piled against the glass, erasing the world beyond. No one was leaving tonight. In the kitchen, Amy pressed her back against the wall, clutching Chloe to her chest. Her whole body shook. Tears streamed down her face, hot and uncontrollable. Through the narrow gap in the door, she could see him, still sitting there, still holding the photograph, like a statue frozen in the storm. Chloe pulled back, her small face wet and bewildered. She looked up at her mother with those blue eyes, his eyes, and asked the question Amy had dreaded for 6 years. "Mommy, why does that man have your picture?" Amy opened her mouth. No words came, because she had no answer. Not one she could give. Not when she kept an identical photograph hidden beneath her pillow every single night. Amy's eyes opened at 4:30 a.m. The apartment was freezing. She pulled her thin blanket tighter, watching her breath form clouds in the darkness. The heating system had been broken for 2 weeks. The repair estimate sat crumpled in the trash, $400 she didn't have. She slipped out of bed and crossed the cramped room to where Chloe slept. The child lay curled beneath 3 blankets, her small chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm. Amy tucked the edges tighter around her daughter's shoulders, then pressed the back of her hand to Chloe's forehead. Warm, too warm. On the nightstand, 3 prescription bottles stood like soldiers. Amy picked up the heart medication and shook it. 5 pills rattled inside. 5 days. She moved to the kitchen, floorboards groaning beneath her feet. The refrigerator hummed the only warm thing in the apartment. She opened it. A half-gallon of milk, 3 eggs, half a loaf of bread going stale. Amy filled a glass with tap water and drank it slowly. Breakfast. The tin box sat on the counter where it always did, dented and rusted at the corners. She pried off the lid and counted the bills inside for the 100th time. 1s, 5s, a few 20s, $1.0247. The surgery cost $45,000. She had 23 days. On the kitchen table, envelopes formed a small mountain. Electric bill past due. Rent 2 months behind. Hospital bills from Chloe's last emergency visit, $3,200 outstanding. Collection agency warnings printed in red ink. Amy stared at the pile. Her eyes stayed dry. She had run out of tears years ago. A cough came from the bedroom. Then another. Amy hurried back to find Chloe sitting up, hand pressed to her chest. "Mommy, it hurts." Amy knelt beside her, stroking her hair. "Breathe slowly, baby. In and out. That's it." The coughing subsided. Chloe's lips had turned faintly blue. When other children ran and played, Chloe sat on the bench and watched. When other children climbed jungle gyms, Chloe colored pictures alone. Every exertion, every excitement her heart couldn't keep up. The defective valve she'd been born with was slowly failing. At 7 o'clock, Amy called the hospital. "Mrs. Turner, the deposit is required by December 20th. The scheduling nurse said. 50%. Otherwise, we'll have to give the surgical slot to another patient." "I understand." "That's 18 days." "I know." Amy hung up and pressed the phone against her forehead. A knock at the door made her jump. Mr. Harold stood in the hallway, 72 years old, wearing a threadbare cardigan. In his weathered hands, he held a pot of steaming oatmeal. "Thought you might need something warm," he said. Amy tried to refuse. He was already walking away. On the table, he'd left an envelope. She opened it. 10 $20 bills, $200. She wanted to chase after him, return it. But through his open door across the hall, something caught her eye, a photograph on his bookshelf. A young girl with honey blonde hair. The girl looked exactly like Amy had at that age, before she could process it. "Missed." Harold's door clicked shut. Across town, Andrew lay on a sagging motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. He hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. The photograph of Amy rested on his chest, now wrinkled from how tightly he'd held it through the night. The child's face burned in his memory. Those eyes. His eyes. 7 years Amy had been here. 7 years his daughter had existed. Why hadn't she found him? His phone displayed 47 missed calls from creditors, 12 voicemails threatening legal action. The bankruptcy had taken everything: the penthouse, the cars, the respect of everyone he'd called friend. Only the photograph remained. The one thing he'd refused to surrender. Andrew turned his head toward the window. Through the frost, a neon sign flickered in the distance. Rosie's Diner. He hadn't left Millbrook. On the nightstand, an open pill bottle sat waiting. 23 sleeping pills. He'd counted them last night, poured them into his palm, stared at them for an hour. Then the child's face appeared in his mind. He'd put the pills back by 8 o'clock. Andrew sat in the corner booth of Rosie's diner, the same booth where everything had shattered the night before. Amy saw him the moment she emerged from the kitchen. Her face went pale, but she picked up a menu, crossed the floor, and placed it before him without a word. Her hands trembled slightly. "Just coffee," Andrew said. It was all he could afford. She returned with a steaming cup. "Set it down." Their eyes met the first real look they'd shared since she'd fled to the kitchen. 7 years of silence stretched between them. Andrew opened his mouth to speak. The front door burst open. A gust of frozen wind swept through the diner. A black limousine idled outside, exhaust rising like smoke from a dragon. A woman stepped through the doorway, silver hair pinned immaculately, a fur coat worth more than everything Amy owned, eyes cold as the Vermont ice. Amy's coffee pot slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. She knew this woman. 7 years ago. This same woman had appeared at Amy's apartment door with a check for $50,000 and 5 words that had destroyed her life. "Stay away from my son." Margaret Whitmore surveyed the diner with visible distaste. Cracked vinyl booths, faded photographs on wood-paneled walls, the smell of bacon grease and cheap coffee. Then her eyes found Andrew. She crossed the floor in 4 decisive strides, heels clicking against tile. "I've been looking for you for 2 weeks." Andrew didn't stand. "How did you find me? Private investigator." Margaret's gaze swept over his rumpled clothes, his unshaven face. "You look terrible. What do you want, Mother?" "To bring you home." She sat across from him, uninvited. "The lawyers have found a path forward. We can restructure, bring in new investors. The Whitmore name still carries weight." "The Whitmore name is bankrupt. Names can be rebuilt, but only if you return to New York. Today." Andrew glanced toward Amy, who stood frozen behind the counter, broken ceramic scattered at her feet. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. "I'm not leaving," he said. Margaret followed his gaze. Recognition flickered across her face, then vanished behind a mask of composure. "Andrew, whatever nostalgia you're chasing in this backwater town." The kitchen door swung open. Chloe bounded into the diner, cheeks flushed from the cold. Mrs. Rosie followed behind, brushing snow from the child's coat. "Mommy, it snowed more." Chloe stopped when she saw the strangers. Her eyes moved from Margaret to Andrew, the man from last night. "Hello," she said, with a fearless curiosity only children possess. Andrew felt his chest tighten. In daylight, the resemblance was even more striking. The shape of her face, the way she tilted her head. "Hello," he managed. Chloe stepped closer. "What's your name, Andrew?" "I'm Chloe. I'm 6. She held up 6 fingers as proof. Margaret watched the exchange with narrowing eyes. She studied the child's features, the curve of her jaw, the set of her shoulders, and those eyes. That particular shade of blue that had marked every Whitmore for 4 generations. "Whose child is this?" Margaret asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Amy rushed forward and pulled Chloe against her. "She's mine." Clearly, Margaret's voice could have frozen the coffee in every cup. "And the father?" Silence. Margaret rose slowly, circling Amy and Chloe like a predator assessing prey. I see. How old did you say she was? 6. Amy said nothing. 6 years. Interesting. Margaret performed the arithmetic visibly, letting the implication hang. Andrew stood. Mother, stop. Stop what? Asking reasonable questions. Margaret turned back to Amy. I couldn't help but overhear your phone conversation earlier. Something about a surgery, medical expenses. Amy's arms tightened around Chloe. I have resources, Margaret continued. Considerable resources. If this child requires medical attention, I could ensure she receives the finest care available. Boston, New York, Mayo Clinic, if necessary. We don't need your help. Don't you? Margaret gestured at the diner. How much does a waitress earn? $12 an hour. 15. How many shifts would that take to afford a pediatric cardiac surgeon? Amy flinched. I'm offering to solve your problem. Margaret pressed. All of Chloe's medical expenses, covered entirely. At what cost? Margaret smiled without warmth. Simply the opportunity to know my granddaughter. The word hung in the air like smoke. She's not your granddaughter. Those eyes suggest otherwise. Margaret withdrew a card from her purse and set it on the counter. My offer stands. Full medical coverage. $500,000 in your account for living expenses. A trust fund for Chloe's education through university. Chloe looked up at her mother, confused by words she didn't understand. All I ask, Margaret continued, is reasonable access, holidays, summers, a proper relationship with her heritage. No. Think carefully, Ms. Turner. You're standing in a failing diner in a dying town, unable to afford heat for your apartment. Your daughter needs surgery you cannot pay for. Margaret leaned closer. Do you truly believe you can give her a better life than I can? Look around you. Andrew stepped between them. That's enough. Margaret's eyebrows rose. Excuse me. I said enough. Andrew faced his mother fully for the first time since she'd arrived. Leave her alone. You're defending her, this woman who hid your child from you. I'm defending her from you. The words landed like a slap. Margaret's composure cracked for just a moment's surprise, then something darker beneath. Andrew turned to Amy. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'd like to talk, just talk, after your shift. Please. Amy hesitated. Every instinct screamed refusal. But something in his voice, desperation, maybe, or genuine remorse, made her pause. Fine, she said quietly. Tonight, they sat on the bench outside Rosie's diner, snow falling softly around them. I'm sorry, Andrew said. For leaving. For not fighting harder. For all of it. Amy stared straight ahead. Sorry doesn't give back 7 years. I know. You chose your career over me, over us. I was 25. Stupid. Ambitious. He exhaled, breath clouding in the cold. I've regretted it every single day. Have you? I kept your photograph. Every apartment, every office, every city, I kept it with me. I never stopped. Don't. Amy's voice hardened. Don't say you never stopped loving me. You don't get to say that. Andrew fell silent. Did you know? Amy asked finally. About what your mother did to me. What do you mean? The $50,000, the threats. Andrew turned to face her. What threats? Before Amy could answer, the diner's back door burst open. Mrs. Rosie ran toward them, face white with panic. Amy, it's Chloe, she can't breathe. Amy sprinted inside. Chloe lay on the kitchen floor, clutching her chest, lips turning blue. Her small body shook with each labored gasp. "Call 911!" Amy screamed. The ambulance arrived in 14 minutes. Andrew stood helpless, watching paramedics lift his daughter onto a stretcher. His daughter, the child he'd met only yesterday, whose name he'd learned only hours ago. Amy climbed into the ambulance without looking back. The doors slammed shut. Sirens wailed into the night. Andrew followed in his car, hands gripping the wheel until his knuckles went white. At the hospital, they waited 3 hours before Dr. Sarah Mitchell emerged. She pulled Amy aside, but Andrew heard every word. "The deterioration is more advanced than her records indicated. The valve is failing faster than we anticipated." "How long?" Amy's voice was barely a whisper. "She needs surgery within 2 weeks, not 23 days. 14. Maximum." Amy's legs buckled. She caught herself on the wall. "The deposit?" She breathed. "How much?" 50%. $22,500. Due before we can schedule." Andrew watched Amy's face crumble. He saw her reach into her pocket, pull out a crumpled receipt, stare at the number written on the back, $1.247, 14 days. Chloe lay in the pediatric intensive care unit, wires trailing from her small body like puppet strings. Monitors beeped in steady rhythm. An oxygen mask covered half her face. Amy sat beside the bed, holding her daughter's hand. She hadn't moved in 6 hours. Andrew stood by the window, watching snow accumulate on the ledge. He felt like an intruder in his own tragedy. Dr. Mitchell returned with updated charts. The echocardiogram confirms severe valve regurgitation, without surgical intervention within 14 days. We're looking at progressive heart failure. "And the cost?" Amy asked, though she already knew. $48,000, given your insurance coverage. $22,500 as deposit before we can book the surgical suite. Amy closed her eyes. "There are payment plans," Dr. Mitchell added gently. "Charitable foundations. I can have our financial counselor. I've called them all. Applications take 6 to 8 weeks. Dr. Mitchell had no answer for that. She squeezed Amy's shoulder and left. The silence that followed was suffocating. Andrew spoke first. "I sold my watch. It's not much. $3,200. I left it at the nurse's station for Chloe's account." Amy didn't respond. "I'm trying to get more. I've called everyone I know." "Everyone you know is gone, Andrew. That's what bankruptcy means." The truth cut deep because it was true. The door swung open. Margaret Whitmore entered, followed by a man in a tailored suit carrying a leather briefcase. A lawyer. The predatory gleam in Margaret's eyes made Amy's stomach turn. "I heard about the emergency," Margaret said. "How fortunate I hadn't left town yet." Andrew stepped forward. "Mother, this isn't the time. On the contrary, this is precisely the time." Margaret nodded to her lawyer, who produced a document from his briefcase. "I've had papers drawn up, a formal agreement." She placed the document on Chloe's bedside table, next to a stuffed rabbit Amy had brought from home. Full coverage of all medical expenses, present and future. A trust fund of $2 million in Chloe's name. $500,000 immediately available to you. Ms. Turner, for housing, education, whatever you require. Amy stared at the papers. In exchange for what? Legal guardianship transferred to the Whitmore family. You would retain visitation rights, of course. Generous ones. You want me to give up my daughter? I want to save my granddaughter's life. Margaret's voice hardened. Something you are manifestly incapable of doing. Andrew grabbed the document and tore it in half. Get out, Andrew. I said get out. Margaret's composure finally cracked. You ungrateful fool. I'm trying to help. I've always tried to help. Everything I've ever done has been for this family. For this family. Andrew laughed bitterly. You don't know the meaning of family. I know more than you think. Margaret's eyes flashed. I know that 7 years ago. I gave that woman $50,000 to disappear. And she took it. The room went still. Andrew turned slowly toward his mother. What did you say? When I discovered she was pregnant, I handled the situation. I offered her money to terminate the pregnancy and leave. She accepted, or so I thought. Margaret glared at Amy. Apparently, she kept the child and the money. Amy rose from her chair, trembling with rage. I never took a cent from you. $50,000. Ms. Turner, don't pretend. I threw that check in your face. Amy's voice shook. I told you I would never kill my baby, and I would never take your blood money. You stood in my apartment and called me trash. You said I would ruin your son's future. You said... Her voice broke. You said no Whitmore would ever claim a child with my blood in its veins. Margaret's face paled. Andrew stared at his mother, as if seeing her for the first time. You knew. You knew she was pregnant, and you hid it from me. I protected you. Protected me. Andrew's voice rose. I have a daughter. A 6-year-old daughter I've never held. Never read a bedtime story to. Never watched take her first steps. And you knew. For 7 years. You knew. She was beneath you. Both of them were beneath you. Andrew recoiled as if struck. Amy stepped closer to Margaret, years of suppressed fury boiling over. You want to know why I never contacted Andrew? Why I raised Chloe alone, working 60 hours a week, choosing between groceries and medicine? Enlighten me. Because I did try to find him. Amy's eyes burned. 7 months pregnant. I flew to New York. I stood outside his office building for 3 hours, trying to find the courage to go in. Andrew went rigid. What? I saw you come out. Amy's voice dropped. With a woman. Young. Beautiful. You had your arm around her. You were laughing. Amy, I thought you'd moved on. Found someone better. Someone your mother approved of. Tears streamed down Amy's face. So I came home. I had Chloe alone in a charity hospital, and I never looked back. Andrew's face had gone white. The woman you saw? Describe her. Blonde, early 20s, red coat. Andrew made a sound like he'd been punched. That was Claire. Who? My sister. Andrew's voice cracked. My little sister. She was visiting from Boston. She died 3 years ago. Car accident. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Amy's legs gave out. She caught herself on the bed rail. Your sister. I don't have another woman. Amy, I never did. That photograph in my wallet, I've carried it for 7 years because I never stopped. He couldn't finish. 7 years. A misunderstanding on a frozen New York sidewalk. A mother's manipulation. a sister mistaken for a lover, and a little girl who had grown up without a father because of all of it. Margaret saw her advantage slipping away. She straightened, composing herself. This changes nothing. The child needs surgery. Neither of you can provide it. My offer stands. Your offer is off the table, Andrew said coldly. Then Chloe dies. Is your pride worth that? If Amy and I can't provide for our daughter, the courts will ensure she's cared for. By the state, by strangers, by anyone except you. Andrew pulled out his phone. And if you pursue custody, I'll make sure every newspaper in the country knows how Margaret Whitmore tried to force a pregnant 21-year-old to abort her grandchild. Margaret's face twisted. You would destroy your own mother. You destroyed my family 7 years ago. I'm just returning the favor. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Margaret gathered her coat. You'll regret this. I already have enough regrets. One more won't matter. She left without another word. The lawyer scurried after her. Silence filled the room. Amy and Andrew stood on opposite sides of Chloe's bed. The unconscious child between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. 7 years. Amy whispered. I hated you for 7 years. I taught myself to hate you so it would hurt less. And now I don't know what I feel. She looked at Chloe. All I know is my daughter needs $48,000 in 14 days. And I have nothing. Andrew reached into his pocket. His fingers touched the photograph worn soft from years of holding. He thought about the pill bottle in his motel room. 23 tablets he'd planned to swallow the night he drove into Millbrook. He'd wanted to die. Now he had a reason to live. There has to be a way, he said. There isn't. There's always a way. Amy laughed bitterly. That's easy to say when you've never had to choose between feeding your child and paying rent. Then teach me. Andrew moved closer. I'm not leaving, Amy. Not this time. Whatever it takes. However long it takes, I'm here. Amy looked at him. The man who'd abandoned her. The man who'd been lied to just as much as she had. The father of her dying daughter. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Mrs. Turner. A woman's voice, crisp and professional. I'm calling from the law offices of Whitmore and Associates. Mrs. Margaret Whitmore has instructed us to file an emergency petition for custody of the minor child, Chloe Turner. You have 24 hours to accept her terms, or we proceed. The line went dead. Amy looked at Andrew. She's not going to stop. Amy whispered. She's going to take my daughter. The next 3 days blurred together like watercolors in rain. Andrew called every contact in his phone. Business partners he'd made millions with. Investors who'd praised his genius at cocktail parties. Friends who'd vacationed on his yacht. No one answered. He left voicemails, sent emails, texted numbers he hadn't used in years. Silence. On the second day, one response came. A former colleague named Richard, who'd been best man at what would have been Andrew's wedding before he'd called it off to focus on the company. Andrew, I heard about the bankruptcy. Look, I'd love to help. But things are tight right now. You understand. Richard had bought a 3rd vacation home last month. Andrew had seen the photos on social media. He understood perfectly. By the 3rd day, Andrew sat in a pawn shop on the edge of Millbrook. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A bored teenager behind the counter examined his Rolex through a jeweler's loupe. "3,000, the kid said. "It's worth 40. "It's worth what someone will pay for it. 3,000. Andrew signed the papers. The watch had been a gift to himself when his company hit its first billion in valuation. He'd worn it to board meetings, charity galas, magazine interviews. Now it bought 8 days of motel rent and a contribution to his daughter's medical fund that wouldn't cover a single hour of surgery. He drove to the hospital and left the cash at the nurse's station. The receptionist looked at him with something between pity and confusion. "I'll add it to the account," she said. "Total collected 4,447, needed $48,000. Days remaining 11. Amy worked doubles, then triples." She arrived at Rosie's diner at 5 in the morning and didn't leave until midnight. 17 hours on her feet, 17 hours of smiling at customers, refilling coffee cups, pretending her world wasn't collapsing. Her hands developed a tremor from exhaustion. On the 4th day, she dropped a tray of dishes. Mrs. Rosie sent her to the back room to rest. 10 minutes, Amy said. "Just 10 minutes. She fell asleep on a stack of flour sacks and didn't wake for 2 hours. At night, she visited Chloe in the hospital. Her daughter was awake now, asking questions Amy couldn't answer. "When can I go home, Mommy?" "Soon, baby." "Is Christmas still coming?" "Of course it is. Will I be better by Christmas?" Amy held Chloe's hand and lied. "You'll be perfect by Christmas." On the 5th night, Amy returned to her apartment at 1 in the morning. The cold hit her like a physical wall. Her breath crystallized in the air. The heating system had been broken for 3 weeks. Now she'd stopped counting. She didn't bother turning on lights. She knew the shape of her poverty by heart. The kitchen floor was freezing through her thin socks. She sat down anyway, back against the cabinet, knees pulled to her chest. And for the first time in years, Amy Turner cried. Not the silent tears she'd learned to hide. Not the brief moments of weakness she allowed herself in shower stalls and locked bathroom stalls. She sobbed. Her body shook with it. Sounds came from her throat that she didn't recognize animal sounds. Grief sounds. The accumulated weight of 7 years of survival finally crushing her. She cried for the girl she'd been at 21, pregnant and terrified and alone. She cried for the birthday parties with dollar store decorations, the Christmases with secondhand toys, the nights she'd eaten nothing so Chloe could have seconds. She cried for every time Chloe had asked about her father and Amy had changed the subject. She cried for the daughter lying in a hospital bed with a failing heart and a mother who couldn't save her. When the tears finally stopped, Amy reached under her bed and pulled out a wooden box. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, lay a ring, a small diamond on a silver band. Nothing extravagant. Andrew had been a graduate student when he'd bought it, working part-time at a consulting firm. He'd proposed on a park bench with pigeons watching, and Amy had said yes before he'd finished the question. She'd never worn it after he left, but she'd never thrown it away either. Now she turned it over in her fingers, watching it catch the moonlight through the frosted window. "Why did I keep you?" she whispered. The ring offered no answers. On the 7th day, Chloe's condition worsened. Dr. Mitchell called Amy at work. "Her oxygen levels are dropping. We've increased support, but the heart is struggling." "How long?" "The surgery needs to happen within 10 days. After that, Success rates dropped from 85% to 60. Below 60? She didn't finish. Amy hung up and walked into the freezer. She stood among the frozen vegetables and boxed meats and screamed until her throat was raw. Mrs. Rosie found her there 20 minutes later, shivering but dry-eyed. "Go home," Mrs. Rosie said. "Be with your daughter. I can't afford to miss shifts." "You can't afford to collapse either." That same night, Andrew returned to his motel room. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the nightstand. The pill bottle stood where he'd left it. 23 tablets. He'd counted them again this morning. His phone displayed a text from Margaret. Custody hearing scheduled for December 18th. Last chance, December 18th. The same day Chloe's surgical window closed. Andrew picked up the pill bottle. The cap came off easily. He poured the contents into his palm, small white circles, promising an end to everything. He was worthless. A failed businessman. An absent father. A man who couldn't save his own daughter. What was the point? He raised his hand toward his mouth. A knock at the door. Andrew froze. The knock came again. Insistent. He poured the pills back into the bottle, shoved it under the pillow. "Who is it?" "Open the door, son." Andrew recognized the voice, the old man from Amy's apartment building. Harold something. He opened the door. "Mr. Harold stood in the snow, 72 years old, holding a wooden box against his chest. His breath came in white puffs. Ice clung to his eyebrows. "I know who you are, Mr. Harold said. "I know what you're thinking about doing." Andrew said nothing. "Before you do something stupid. Look at this." "Mr. Harold thrust the box into Andrew's hands. "Amy doesn't know I saved these. She burned the others. But I kept them. I thought someday they might matter." Andrew opened the box. Letters. Dozens of letters. All addressed to him in Amy's handwriting. All bearing his old New York address. "She wrote to you every month for 7 years. Mr. Harold said. Told you about Chloe. First steps, first words, first day of school. Every milestone you missed, she wrote it down." Andrew's hands trembled. She never sent them. Couldn't make herself do it. But she never stopped writing either. Mr. Harold's eyes glistened. "That girl has been carrying a torch for 7 years, too proud and too hurt to admit it. And now she's about to lose everything that matters." Andrew picked up the first letter. The envelope was yellowed with age. He opened it. "Andrew, today our daughter was born. 6 pounds, 4 ounces. I named her Chloe because it means blooming. She has your eyes. I wish you could see her. I wish things were different. I wish the words blurred." Andrew realized he was crying. He read through the night, every letter, every word. 7 years of love and loss and longing, poured onto paper and never sent. When dawn broke, Andrew set down the final letter. His eyes were swollen, his heart was broken. But for the first time since arriving in Millbrook, his mind was clear. He looked at the hospital visible through his window. Then at the letters spread across his bed. Then at the pill bottle hidden under his pillow. He walked to the bathroom and flushed every tablet down the drain. Amy had waited 7 years. He wouldn't waste another day. "I don't have money," he said aloud to the empty room. "I don't have power, but I have this town, and I have a story." The idea was desperate, probably doomed to fail. But it was all he had. Andrew arrived at Rosie's diner before sunrise. Mrs. Rosie was already there, rolling out biscuit dough in the kitchen. She looked up when he entered, flour dusting her forearms. "We're not open yet." "I know. I came to talk to you." She studied him with eyes that had seen 68 years of human nature. "About what?" "About saving Chloe." Andrew sat at the counter and laid out his idea. A community fundraiser, right here, at the diner. Auction items donated by local businesses. A story that could spread beyond Millbrook. Mrs. Rosie listened without interrupting. When he finished, she wiped her hands on her apron. "You're bankrupt." "Yes." "You abandoned that girl 7 years ago." "Yes." "And now you want to organize a charity event." "I don't have money, but I have a story people might care about. And this town." He gestured at the photographs on the walls. Generations of Millbrook families eating at these same booths. This town takes care of its own. Mrs. Rosie was quiet for a long moment. "In 40 years, she said finally, I've never seen Millbrook turn its back on a child who needed help." She pulled out her phone. "I know people, church groups, business owners, the Lions Club. Give me 2 days." The town responded faster than Andrew had dared hope. By noon, Mrs. Rosie had made 37 phone calls. By evening, commitments started rolling in. The bakery on Main Street offered to donate 300 cupcakes. The hardware store pledged tools and supplies for a silent auction. Pastor Williams announced the fundraiser at Wednesday night service and passed around a sign-up sheet. Andrew worked 18 hours a day. He designed flyers on a borrowed laptop. The screen cracked but functional. He wrote social media posts, crafted press releases, called the local newspaper. The Burlington Free Press sent a reporter on day 2. She was young, hungry for a story that would make readers feel something. Andrew gave her everything. The bankruptcy, the photograph in his wallet, the daughter he'd never known, the mother who'd tried to keep them apart. "This is incredible," the reporter said, scribbling notes. "Former billionaire loses everything, discovers he has a dying daughter, tries to save her with nothing but community support." "It's not about me," Andrew said. "It's about Chloe. It's about Amy." There, the story. Amy discovered the fundraiser on day 3. She walked into the diner for her shift and froze. A banner hung across the front window, "Save Chloe Community Fundraiser." Saturday night. Her face went pale, then red. She found Andrew in the back, sorting donated auction items. "What is this?" He looked up. "A chance. You didn't ask me. You would have said no. Because I don't want charity." Amy's voice shook. "I don't want the whole town pitying us." "This isn't pity." Andrew set down the box he was holding. "These people know you. Amy, they've watched you work double shifts for 6 years. They've seen you put Chloe on the school bus every morning. They love that little girl. They don't owe us anything. No, they don't. But they want to help. That's different." Mrs. Rosie appeared in the doorway. "He's right, Amy. I've lived in this town my whole life. When Bill Henderson's barn burned down, we rebuilt it in a weekend. When the Martinez boy needed cancer treatment, we raised $40,000 in a month." She put a hand on Amy's shoulder. "Pride doesn't keep your daughter alive. Love does. Let people love you." Amy stood rigid, every instinct screaming resistance. Then she thought of Chloe, the oxygen mask, the monitors beeping their steady countdown. "Fine," she whispered. "But if this fails, it won't," Andrew said. Saturday night arrived cold and clear. Rosie's diner overflowed with people. Farmers in worn flannel, shop owners in Sunday best, families with children who played with Chloe at school. The silent auction tables groaned with items: handmade quilts, gift certificates, a weekend cabin rental donated by the mayor himself. Andrew moved through the crowd, shaking hands, telling the story again and again. Each time, someone pressed cash into his palm, 20s, 50s, a crisp 100 from the owner of the auto body shop. "My grandson has a heart condition," the man said, eyes wet. "I know what you're going through." An elderly couple approached Amy near the coffee station. The woman wore a dress that had been elegant 30 years ago. "We were saving for our 50th anniversary trip," she said, pressing an envelope into Amy's hands. "But we've already seen enough of the world. Let this help your girl see more of it." Amy opened the envelope. $500. "I can't accept this." "You can. You will." The woman patted her cheek. "Some things matter more than cruises. By 9 o'clock, Mrs. Rosie counted the donations. 12 or 847. More than Amy made in 3 months. Still not enough, not even close. But it was a start. The newspaper article went live Sunday morning. "Bankrupt billionaire fights to save daughter." He never knew by noon. It had been shared 400 times. By evening, over 2,000. Donations trickled in from beyond Millbrook. Strangers in Burlington, Montpelier, Boston, $10 here, 20 there. A woman in New Hampshire sent 100 with a note. "My daughter died waiting for a transplant. Save yours." Andrew checked the fundraising page obsessively. The number climbed. Slowly. Painfully slowly. But it climbed. On day 9, Amy allowed Andrew to visit Chloe alone. He sat beside her bed, watching her color in a picture book. Her movements were slow, careful. The oxygen tube in her nose made her look smaller than she was. "Mommy says you're her friend," Chloe said without looking up. "That's right." "Were you friends a long time ago?" "A very long time ago." Chloe considered this. "Why do you have her picture in your wallet?" Andrew's throat tightened. "Because she's the most important person I ever knew." Chloe nodded, accepting this with the simple logic of childhood. Then she set down her crayon and looked at him directly. "Are you my daddy?" The question hit Andrew like a physical blow. "What makes you ask that?" "You have the same eyes as me." Chloe pointed to his face, then her own. "And Mommy keeps your picture too, under her pillow. I saw it once." Andrew couldn't speak. Tears blurred his vision. "Mommy cries sometimes when she looks at it," Chloe continued. "Late at night when she thinks I'm sleeping." A small hand reached out and touched his. "It's okay if you're my daddy," Chloe said. "I always wanted one." Andrew broke. He pulled the child gently into his arms, careful of the wires, careful of the tubes, and held her for the first time. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here." "You're here now," Chloe said. 4 words. Simple and profound. You're here now. Day 10. Fundraising total $38,500. Still short by nearly $10,000. 5 days until Margaret's custody hearing. 4 days until surgery became too risky. Amy sat in Chloe's room, staring at the numbers on her phone. It rang. Unknown number. She answered. Ms. Turner. A woman's voice. Cold. Professional. I'm calling from the law offices of Whitmore and Associates. Mrs. Whitmore's petition has been accelerated. The emergency custody hearing is now scheduled for December 16th. 2 days away. Additionally, Mrs. Whitmore has submitted evidence of financial inadequacy and environmental instability. She's requesting immediate temporary custody pending full evaluation. Amy's blood went cold. She can't do that. The judge will decide what she can do. You have 48 hours to prepare your response. The line went dead. Amy looked at Chloe sleeping in the hospital bed. Then at the fundraising total that still wasn't enough. Then at the window, where snow had begun to fall again. 48 hours to save her daughter from Margaret. 4 days to save her daughter from death. And she had never felt more alone. The storm hit Millbrook at 11 p.m. on December 15th. Weather services called it the worst blizzard in 30 years. Winds gusted to 60 miles per hour. Snow fell so thick that headlights illuminated nothing but white chaos. Power lines went down across 3 counties. Street lights flickered and died. The hospital switched to emergency generators, red backup lights casting everything in an apocalyptic glow. Andrew was at Rosie's diner, helping Mrs. Rosie count the final donations. When his phone rang, Amy's voice was barely recognizable. Chloe collapsed, her heart there saying static swallowed her words. Amy, the line went dead. Andrew ran. The hospital was 4 blocks away. He covered them in 3 minutes, lungs burning in the frozen air, snow blinding him with every step. He burst through the emergency room doors, ice crusting his hair and eyebrows. Amy stood in the hallway outside the PICU, arms wrapped around herself, face devastated. What happened? Cardiac arrhythmia, severe. Amy's voice was hollow. Dr. Mitchell says the valve is failing. She needs surgery tonight, right now. Then do it. The surgeon isn't here. Amy laughed a terrible, broken sound. Dr. Carver, the pediatric cardiac specialist. He's in Burlington, 60 miles away. The highway's closed, no vehicles allowed. Andrew looked through the window at Chloe. His daughter lay motionless. Machines breathing for her, monitors screaming warnings in red. There has to be a way. There isn't. Amy slid down the wall until she sat on the cold tile floor. I called everyone. State police, National Guard, helicopter services. Everything is grounded. Nothing is moving. Andrew pulled out his phone. He dialed Dr. Carver's number. Mrs. Rosie had gotten it from Dr. Mitchell days ago. The surgeon answered on the second ring. Dr. Carver, this is Andrew Whitmore, Chloe Turner's father. Mr. Whitmore, I'm aware of the situation. I want to help, but the roads are impassable. I've tried 3 times to leave Burlington. My car got stuck twice. What if someone came to get you? Excuse me. What if someone drove from Millbrook to Burlington, picked you up, and brought you back? Silence on the line. That's 120 miles round trip in a Category 3 blizzard. The state police have declared a travel emergency. Anyone on those roads tonight is risking their life. Can you be ready in 2 hours? Mr. Whitmore, can you be ready? A long pause. If someone actually makes it here, I'll be waiting. Andrew hung up. Amy stared at him. What are you doing? I'm going to Burlington. That's insane. You'll die out there. Maybe. Andrew knelt beside her, taking her hands. They were ice cold. But our daughter will definitely die if I don't try. That's not a choice, Amy. That's a certainty. Andrew, I spent 7 years being absent. 7 years being a coward. Let me do this one thing. He squeezed her hands. Let me be your father. Amy's eyes filled with tears. If you don't come back, then Chloe will know her father died trying to save her. That's more than she had yesterday. He kissed her forehead the first time he touched her with tenderness in 7 years and ran for the exit. The roads were a nightmare. Andrew's rental car, a cheap sedan with bald tires, fish-tailed on every turn. Snow piled on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Visibility dropped to 10 feet, then 5, then nothing but white. He drove by memory and prayer. The highway was technically closed. Barriers blocked the on-ramp. Andrew drove around them, his headlights the only illumination in a world erased by snow. 60 miles to Burlington. 60 miles of ice and wind and darkness. His car slid off the road twice. Both times, he gunned the engine, wheels spinning, until momentum carried him back onto the asphalt. The third time, the car wouldn't move. Andrew got out into the storm. Snow immediately soaked through his clothes. Wind cut through him like knives. He pushed, hands on the trunk, feet slipping on ice. He pushed with everything he had. The car rocked, slid forward an inch, 2 inches. He pushed harder. Something in his shoulder popped, a muscle tearing, ligament screaming, but he didn't stop. The wheels caught. The car lurched forward. Andrew dove into the driver's seat and kept going, back at the hospital. Chloe's condition deteriorated. Dr. Mitchell worked frantically, adjusting medications, monitoring vitals. The child's heart rhythm grew increasingly erratic. We're running out of time, she told Amy. If surgery doesn't happen within 4 hours, the damage may be irreversible. Amy stood at the window, watching the storm rage outside. Where was he? Was he alive? Dead in a ditch somewhere, frozen and alone. The waiting room doors opened. Margaret Whitmore walked in. She wore a designer coat and carried a leather folder. Behind her, her lawyer struggled with a snow-covered briefcase. Ms. Turner. Margaret's voice was smooth as silk. I heard about the emergency. How fortunate that I was still in town. Amy turned slowly. Get out. I have paperwork here that could save your daughter's life. 1 signature. And Chloe receives the best cardiac care money can buy. Tonight. At the cost of losing her forever. You were never going to keep her. Margaret stepped closer. Look at yourself. Look at where you are. A charity case in a charity hospital. Waiting for a miracle that isn't coming. Something snapped inside Amy. 7 years of silence. 7 years of swallowed rage. 7 years of working until her hands cracked and her feet bled, of skipping meals so her daughter could eat, of lying awake wondering if she'd done the right thing. You want to know why I never told Andrew about Chloe? Amy's voice rose, cutting through the quiet of the waiting room. Because of you. Because you came to my apartment when I was 21 and pregnant and terrified. And you told me I was trash. You offered me money to kill my baby. You said I would ruin your precious son's future. Margaret's face tightened. Lower your voice. No. Amy stepped forward. For 7 years, I let you win. I stayed silent. I raised my daughter alone because I believed I wasn't good enough. But you know what I am good enough. I work harder in 1 week than you have in your entire life. I love that little girl more than you've ever loved anything. And I will die before I let you take her from me." Nurses had stopped in the hallway. Patients peered from doorways. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "You're making a scene," Margaret hissed. "Good. Let them see who you really are." The emergency room doors crashed open. Andrew staggered in, covered in snow. Face white with cold, left arm hanging at an odd angle. Behind him, a gray-haired man in a heavy coat carried a medical bag. "Dr. Carver." Amy's legs nearly gave out. "You made it." Andrew swayed on his feet. "Told you I would." "Dr. Mitchell rushed forward. "Dr. Carver, thank God. We need to operate immediately." "Show me to the patient." The surgical team mobilized. Chloe was prepped for emergency transport to the operating room. Before they wheeled her away, Amy leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Mommy loves you, baby. Be brave." Chloe's eyes fluttered open. She saw Andrew standing behind Amy, arm cradled against his chest. Snow melting in his hair. "Daddy came," she whispered. Andrew's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in a single moment. "Daddy came," he confirmed. "And Daddy's not going anywhere." The surgical doors closed behind them. Margaret stood frozen in the waiting room, her leverage evaporating. Andrew turned to face his mother. He pulled out his phone with his good hand. "Before you say anything else," he said, "you should know I recorded every threat you made to Amy, every phone call, every conversation." His thumb hovered over the screen. One button, and every news outlet in New England knows how Margaret Whitmore tried to coerce a young mother into giving up her child. Margaret's face went gray. "Leave," Andrew said. "Now. And if you ever come near my family again, I'll destroy what's left of your reputation." For a long moment, Margaret didn't move. Then, slowly, she gathered her coat and walked out into the storm. She didn't look back. 4 hours. Amy and Andrew sat in the surgical waiting area, side by side. Not touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth. A nurse had wrapped Andrew's shoulder dislocated, possibly torn, but he'd refused treatment until Chloe was out of surgery. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say that the silence didn't communicate better. At 5:47 a.m., the surgical doors opened. Dr. Carver emerged, mask pulled down around his neck, exhaustion carved into his features. Amy stood so fast her chair fell backward. Andrew grabbed her hand. She let him. "Dr." Carver looked at them both. The surgery, Amy stopped breathing, was successful. The words didn't register immediately. Amy stared at him, waiting for the qualification, the complication, the devastating twist. "The valve has been replaced. Her heart is beating normally. She'll need recovery time and follow-up care. But Chloe is going to be fine." Amy's knees buckled. Andrew caught her. They stood there in the harsh hospital light, holding each other upright. 7 years of pain and misunderstanding dissolving into tears of relief. "She's okay," Amy whispered. "She's okay. She's okay," Andrew repeated, crying openly. "Our daughter is okay." Outside, the storm was beginning to fade. The first pale light of dawn crept across the horizon, painting the snow-covered world in shades of pink and gold. And somewhere in the recovery room, a 6-year-old girl with her father's eyes opened her own and asked for her mommy. Chloe woke on the third day after surgery. Her eyes fluttered open to find Amy asleep in the chair beside her bed. Hands still wrapped around her daughter's fingers. Morning light streamed through the hospital window, catching dust motes and golden beams. "Mommy." Amy jerked awake instantly. "Baby." "Oh, baby, you're awake." "My chest feels funny." "That's because the doctors fixed your heart. You're going to be okay now." Chloe considered this information with the solemn gravity of a 6-year-old processing miracles. Then she looked around the room. "Where's the man? The one with my eyes?" Amy's breath caught. "Do you want to see him?" Chloe nodded. Amy stepped into the hallway where Andrew had been keeping vigil for 72 hours. His arm was in a sling, his face unshaven, his clothes wrinkled beyond recognition. He looked up when she appeared. "She's asking for you." Andrew entered the room like a man approaching sacred ground. Chloe watched him settle into the chair on the opposite side of her bed. For a long moment, neither spoke. "Your arm is hurt," Chloe observed. "It'll heal." "Did you hurt it saving me?" Andrew glanced at Amy. "Who told you that?" "The nice nurse. She said you drove through a big storm to bring the doctor." Chloe reached out with her small hand and touched his sling. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore." Chloe studied his face with an intensity that made Andrew's heart ache. "Mommy," she said, still looking at Andrew. "He has my eyes. The exact same blue." Amy knelt beside the bed, taking Chloe's other hand. "That's because he's your daddy, sweetheart." The words hung in the air, like Christmas ornaments, fragile, precious, transformative. Chloe turned to Andrew. "You're my daddy, for real." "For real? Are you going to stay?" The question carried the weight of 7 years, of every birthday without a father, every school event with an empty chair. Every night Chloe had wished on stars for something she couldn't name. Andrew took her hand so small in his, so perfect. "I'm never leaving again. I promise." Chloe smiled. Then she lifted both their hands, Amy's on her left, Andrew's on her right, and brought them together over her heart. "Now we're a family," she declared, 2 days before Christmas. Amy went to the hospital billing office to discuss payment plans. The clerk frowned at her computer screen. "Ms. Turner, there's nothing to discuss. The account has been settled in full." "That's impossible." "Paid 3 days ago. Anonymous donor." The clerk handed her a slip of paper. "They left this." Amy unfolded the note. 5 words in shaky handwriting. "For the girl who stayed. H. B." She ran. "Mr. Harold answered his door in the same threadbare cardigan he always wore. His apartment smelled of pipe tobacco and old books. "You paid for Chloe's surgery." Amy's voice trembled. "All of it. How?" "Sold my house 30 years ago when my wife passed. Been renting ever since, saving the money." He shrugged. "Never had anyone to leave it to. Until you moved in across the hall. I can't accept. You already have." His eyes softened. "I watched you struggle for 7 years. Amy. Working yourself to the bone. Never asking for help. Too proud, too stubborn." He reached out and touched her cheek. "You remind me of my daughter. The one I lost before you were born." The photograph on his bookshelf. The girl who looked like Amy. "I never knew how to say it," Mr. Harold continued. "Never knew how to be a father to you without overstepping. So I helped in small ways. Anonymous gifts when you were behind on rent. Groceries left at your door. Amy thought of all the times she'd found unexpected help cash in envelopes. Food she couldn't account for, bills mysteriously reduced. It was you, all along. Family isn't always blood, Mr. Harold said. Sometimes it's just someone who refuses to let you fall. Amy embraced him. The father she'd never known she had. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear. The apartment was warm for the first time in months. Andrew had fixed the heating system himself, spending 2 days learning from YouTube videos and cursing at corroded pipes. A small tree stood in the corner, decorated with paper ornaments Chloe had made in the hospital. Candles flickered on the windowsill. Snow fell softly outside, blanketing Millbrook in white silence. The three of them sat together on the worn couch. Chloe between her parents, a cup of hot chocolate warming her hands. "I made something," Chloe announced. She produced a piece of paper from beneath the cushion. A crayon drawing of 3 figures holding hands, a woman with yellow hair, a man with brown hair, and a small girl between them. At the bottom, in wobbly letters, "My family." Amy pressed her hand to her mouth. Andrew's eyes glistened. "That's us," Chloe explained unnecessarily. Together, later, after Chloe had fallen asleep between them. Andrew reached into his pocket and withdrew something small. The engagement ring. The one Amy had kept hidden for 7 years. "Mr. Harold gave it to me," he said quietly. "He found it in your apartment when he was checking the heating." Amy stared at the ring. "I don't know why I kept it. I don't know why I kept your photograph." Andrew turned the ring over in his fingers. "Maybe we were both waiting. For the right moment. For each other." Amy didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. "I'm not asking for anything," Andrew continued. "Not forgiveness, not love. Not yet. I know 7 years can't be erased in one night." "No," Amy agreed. "They can't. But maybe they can be redeemed. Slowly. Day by day." Amy looked at her daughter, sleeping peacefully. Heart finally whole. At the man who had driven through a blizzard to save her. At the small apartment that had been her prison for so long. It didn't feel like a prison anymore. "Stay for Christmas," she said finally. "We'll figure out the rest." Andrew slipped the ring back into his pocket. "That's enough for now." Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, candlelight painted the walls in gold. And for the first time in 7 years, the apartment on the 3rd floor felt like something Amy had almost forgotten how to recognize. It felt like home. A faded photograph. A child's innocent question. And 3 lives changed forever. This story began with secrets and ended with truth. It walked through betrayal, misunderstanding, and 7 years of silence. But ultimately, it arrived at something we all long for: family, forgiveness, and the courage to start again. Perhaps you recognize something in these pages. Maybe you have carried a photograph of someone you never stopped loving. Maybe you have written letters you could not send. Maybe there is a conversation you have avoided for years, a wound you have left unhealed, a second chance you are afraid to take. Or perhaps you are the one waiting for someone to return, waiting for an apology that may never come, waiting for a knock on the door that could change everything. We all carry our own versions of Andrew's wallet, our own versions of Amy's hidden ring, our own versions of Chloe's simple, devastating question. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. Tell us what moved you. Share which moment made you pause, remember, or cry. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story today, someone carrying their own 7 years of silence, please pass it along. Some stories are meant to be shared.